I had heard that Agatha Christie had grown tired of Poirot. And I always thought that was pretty sad because the whole world loved this character except his mother, his creator. And I thought, now if I'm lucky enough to get a series and to be with a character for the rest of my life, I don't want that to happen to me. So I sat down and I thought, now, what is the best chance to have that not happen? And I thought, well, I will create a man I would marry. And so I gave him all the qualities that I admire in a man. I realized that they're actually all the qualities I admire in a human being. Many of the qualities I myself do not possess. So I'm actually writing a person who is more evolved and much nicer than I am. But I like people of integrity. I like people who have the courage of their convictions. I like people who are funny and thoughtful and don't take themselves too seriously, but who stand up for what they believe in. I admire that. And that's what Gamache has. You'd never mistake him for an SAS officer. He is more thoughtful, like a professor. And so that's really how I met him. I thought I was feeling quite pleased with myself. Thought, aren't I clever? And then one day over breakfast, I realized that I not only had met him, I'd actually really married him, that he's based on my husband. I'm inspired by a lot of things. I read this wonderful Stephen King book on writing, and he talks about, it was so liberating to read it because it was been my experience as well, and I've been sort of embarrassed about it, that I'm not inspired necessarily by any single great event or image or turn of phrase. It's really a bunch of smaller grace notes that come together and they coalesce, and there's the theme. And a book for me, and I think for most people, really isn't a plot. It's not an idea, because that's not big enough. It has to be all of these other things that can walk and live and breathe for a whole year, maybe for the rest of your life. So for me, I listen to a lot of music. I find that very inspirational. It takes me to a place I can't normally access. But every one of my novels has been inspired by a different poem. And when I run into aspiring authors and they ask me my advice, I always tell them, read poetry. And I don't care if it's a Hallmark card or A.A. Milne, Winnie the Pooh, or Auden. And for me, that's been very helpful. So what I do is I cut out the couplet, attach it to the laptop, and then when I get lost, I can come back to center and say, oh, that's the theme. And often, the couplet isn't used in the book at all, though I do use quite a bit of poetry, but it's the spine of the book. I know that's what it's about loneliness, it's about misunderstandings, it's about sorrow, it's about joy, it's about whatever. Robert Frost, in a letter to a friend, once famously said that for him a poem begins as a lump in the throat, and that for me, my books begin as a lump in the throat, as something strongly felt, so strongly that I can then explore it for 400 pages. But yes, Three Pines is definitely a character in the books. And it was important to me. The first 4 books were meant to be, and are in fact, set in different seasons for that reason. The first book in the fall, second book in the winter, and so on. And I wanted my books to also be, ideally what I was trying to do was drop that fourth wall. So that when people are reading the books, you're not watching Gamache, you're not watching Olivier or Ruth or anything, you're accompanying them. And the best way to do that is to make the books sensuous. But I want to engage all the senses so that you can smell the wood smoke, you can taste the food the croissant, you can feel the chill in the air. And that brings alive a sense of place, too. I think of Gamache as, in Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, he talked about the better angels of our nature. And I genuinely think of Gamache as the better angel of my nature. It's quite a challenge to write a man who is both smarter and nicer than I am. It's very humbling. It is really quite humbling. But he does. It sounds silly to feel inspired by, because I think there are qualities. He is aspirational for me. He is the person. I don't think, he's a man, obviously. I don't know why, as an Anglophone woman, I write a Francophone man. I think
therapy is in order. But what I am when I'm writing is writing just a human being, and he is the human being I hope to become. My initial intention was to set every book in 3 pines, but I realized that that really would beggar belief, that the small village could sustain the murder rate. And it was becoming increasingly difficult to describe it as idyllic when... So I decided that every second book, after the third book, would be set primarily somewhere away. So the 4th book was set in a country inn, but there were scenes back in Three Pines. Bury Your Dead, primarily in Quebec City, but scenes back at Three Pines. I understood eventually it would be necessary to take Gamache completely away. And that was a risk. And that's what I tried to do, is to keep my own interest in the series, and also to become a better writer, I need to keep risking and trying and sometimes failing. And that was certainly a risk, and not everybody appreciated it. But I really wanted to follow him somewhere else. And I chose the monastery, because there are a lot of monasteries in Quebec. And I loved, again, that duality, the idea of these cloistered monks who had taken a vow of silence becoming world famous for their voices. Yes. And the power of music and the love of music, and how that also can feed into addiction.
Now, obviously you like cozies. Do you consider these novels cozies?
No.
No.
No, I see them as traditional. I actually see them as more like neo-traditional, in that taking a form that I respect and admire, the golden age of the traditional mysteries with Dorothy L. Sayers and Agatha Christie and Niall Marsh and all those, and then bringing it up to date, sort of reinventing it for the 21st century. They're definitely puzzle mysteries. They're whodunits, and they're village mysteries, but I don't see them as cozies. They're not really even about murder, even though there is a murder in each of them. But there's only one. I don't throw a body in every 20 or 30 pages, or when things get slow, throw in someone else. I only need one murder, because the murder is really the device and the conceit to look at issues of belonging, of friendship, and the limits of friendship at good versus evil. They're kind of passion plays. There's a magical realism about these books. They're allegories as much as actual murder mystery. So there are stories beneath the story, and then people get to choose. Are you going to read the superficial story, which they certainly can, and at that level they could be seen as cozies or village mysteries. But if you choose, you read the story beneath the story, and that's what kind of rides in on the murder, and it's what shattered people do. I had, though, the great privilege of sitting across from people for 20 years and listening very closely to their stories. And people didn't end up on my radio show because nothing had happened in their lives. They ended up there because something extreme had happened, either extremely good or extremely bad. So I got to see people in extreme circumstances emotionally. And I saw and heard such bitterness and such anger and such hate and such calls for revenge, often absolutely legitimate, and I would feel the same way. But I also saw acts of forgiveness that left me speechless, and acts of such beauty that I was just in awe of that. So for 20 years, I got to see people at their best and at their worst. I'm extremely aware of how lucky I am that I have these characters and that I get to do this. And people sometimes, I think, forget what a privilege and what a joy writing really should be. It doesn't make it easy. And particularly Bury Your Dead was written quite close to the bone. But wow, how lucky that I get this chance to do it. I'm really very aware of, I think because I've been through dark times, that my time in the sunshine. And I know that one day it'll pass, as it should do. And it'll be someone else's turn in the sunshine. But as long as I'm here, I am grateful every day. And when I'm grateful, then I live in Three Pines. And when I lose that, I start to go into the forest.